Was it a conscious move to explore a more intimate setting than your recent movies?
It does seem more intimate, doesn't it? It seems like more intimate than, say, Mumbai or Space, although Space is very intimate. Space is psychological, really. It wasn't so much a conscious choice like that, although it was an intriguing challenge to the chaos of Mumbai. But people are very important in the film. And in fact, we begin the film with masses of people, these endless crowds of people. And those are who he swims back to at the end of the film, right at the end of the film. But yeah, the isolation of this individual was an intriguing challenge to me as a director. I've never made a film like this before. I've always made films about groups of people, like Space, a bunch of people in space. That's a classic in, you know, those space movies. They're always about a bunch of people who are fighting, you know, arguing with each other or whatever, falling out, killing each other, whatever it is they do. But when you have a group of people like that as a director, you have a kind of control of the group dynamic. It gives you great influence. You can bring people forward in the mix, drop people back. But then I remember seeing The Wrestler when Mickey Rourke really very much dominates the film. And I remember thinking, I must make a film like that one day where it's just one actor and you follow the actor. And you have to learn some different skills in doing it. You have to give them a lot of the control. Because if you try to manipulate them too much, like you can do with a group dynamic, you spot it. It's so intimate, one-person films like this. It's so tight, the camera. You can see if they're doing what they've been told rather than finding it themselves, really. So it's a really interesting... I mean, you keep control in the end because you edit the film and, you know, but it's a very different approach you have to make. And I love trying to start again each time you make a film, that you're trying to make a film you've not made before. You inevitably run into yourself sometimes and you think this is the same story or this is the same ingredient. But as much as you can, you try and keep it original for yourself, you know, that you haven't touched it before.
Would you say that's been perhaps your greatest test as a director so far, the treatment of this story? Bearing in mind it is confined pretty much just to a cave. To give it that dynamic and transcendental feeling with some of the camera placements, for example, inside Aron's arm and his little pee bottle. The kind of innovation you deployed for that, has that been your greatest test?
I don't know whether you think of it like that. You certainly think.
How do you handle it to make it not seem so static?
It was because we always wanted to make it an action movie. I remember reading it, not his whole book, but the chapters that are set in the canyon, and I was riveted, and I never was bored reading them. I was always like, wow. And I thought you've got to find a cinematic equivalent to convey that in the way that when I read the book, I felt like compulsive. It was compulsive reading, like a potboiler, like a kind of good thriller. It was amazing, kind of, and I thought we've got to get that. And so you use the techniques that you've learnt in cinema, and with digital cameras, which were used on Slumdog Millionaire and on 28 Days Later, the intimacy those cameras allow you to do is perfect for this place where he's so trapped. Because you can't get a big movie camera in there anyway, it's so tight. And he himself has a little digital camera, so you think you use the digital cameras. Once you use them, they free you up. You can then go anywhere with them in a way. Because some of them are like kind of internal organs cameras, you know, like they use in surgery. You know, you can literally go to that degree if you want to. And so we imitated that. We didn't actually use internal cameras as such. They're sort of tricks. But yeah, it was that idea of literally, if you're going to make a film like this, there must be nothing barred from you looking at. You've got to be able to look at everything. It's got to be naked. You know, his portrayal has got to be absolutely naked. There's no... So, you know, he drinks his own urine and he fantasizes and nearly masturbates about these girls. And, you know, because it's like you cannot bar anything. It has to be completely... he has to be completely vulnerable. And I think if you don't do it like that, you wouldn't believe. There's no point in doing it, really. And if you put those ingredients, they compensate for the fact that he can't get out of there yet. You know, you build up a picture of a man, really, trapped alone. And what's important in his life... now that he is completely vulnerable, what is important in his life, and it's these great stories. They stand for what's important in our lives. That's what you watch it for. You think about people you know yourself and the way you've treated them. You know, from the simple thing of not answering your mum's message because you think, oh my God, there'll be hours on the phone. I've got to get out. I've got to get to work or whatever it is. The simplest thing to big things about the way you treat the love in your life and things like that. You know.
You mentioned this unflinching portrayal. I mentioned
Yeah.
the masturbation and peeing into a bottle, and also the goriness of the actual limb chopping in
Yeah.
the end. Was there any pressure on you from the money men of the studio to kind of tone it down to make it this more mass appeal, broad kind of commodity.
Yeah, they were very good actually, because I thought there would be, and I was very prepared to fight that battle. And we deliberately shot the film very carefully based on his description in the book. It's very accurate to that, and I didn't want people distorting it either to make it more palatable, which I would have argued would have trivialised what he went through, nor did I want people to turn it into a horror movie, you know, and try and sell it to the horror quartile or whatever they call them, you know, the Saw fans, you know. I didn't want that to happen to it either, because I think you have to say, you have to portray honestly what he felt about it, which is that and he does say this, Aaron, that it was an incredible thing that he did, but what he gained was much greater than what he sacrificed in a way. And that was very important, that it was, and that's why I feel it's a kind of mainstream movie, because I think, as he says, that, you know, God willing, you will never have to cut your arm off, obviously, but you will face days when you have that rock and it won't seem to move and nothing seems to work, you know, there doesn't seem to be, and despair gets hold, you know, and it's a terrible viral thing when it gets hold of you, despair. And he loves telling the story because he believes it's a way that even people who faced appalling despair should always be able to get over it somehow, that there is always something worth working for and working your way around it, really, and that's the inspiration of the story.
And the hallucinations in the movie reminded me of Renton's trips in Trainspotting. It just stopped short of having a baby crawling along the cave wall.
Well, he did have a little child in it, but he doesn't crawl along the wall. No, I did love the hallucinations in it, and it is really interesting. Dehydration, and of course, he ran out. He measured his water as carefully as he could, but he ran out of it after a couple of days. And when you run out of water and you dehydrate, your brain comes apart, literally, like a Rubik's Cube coming apart. It's like unbelievable what happens to you. And the hallucinations, when we Aaron said this, but we also took a lot of medical advice about it. They're intense. You don't need to take drugs. It's the brain literally starts to come apart, and all sorts of things pop in there, including Scooby-Doo as it happens. And I love doing all that kind of stuff. I love cinema taking you places like that. Yeah.